And welcome to the Howard Eskin Show. Big welcome. Another great show. They're all great shows. Another great show. But I think they're all great shows. But here's something special tonight. We have a new presenting sponsor, which I really believe can be helpful to many of you out there. And that our new presenting sponsor is Stillwell Financial Advisors. And let me tell you, any wealth you want to invest, Jeff Stillwell is the guy, really on top of things. And the one thing that I do when I have new partners, sponsors, I talk to them, I get to know them, and you've got to have a trust. And I certainly have a trust. He's one of us. Great guy, and he's on top of everything that you need if you want to invest. It's just, I got a great education from Jeff Stillwell. Regular guy, really sharp, got to know him, and very, very impressed. And if you have any intention of managing money, wealth management, whatever you need from that part of your life, Jeff Stillwell, and there's the number 732 343 0813. That's 732 343 0843. All right, let me run down some of the things that we're going to do in the show. Obviously, we're going to talk to Joe Banner tonight. And I'm telling you, there's so much background with Joe Banner and the Eagles and things that went on and how they selected coaches and the draft, obviously what went on during the draft, all those kind of things. But also, after we talk to Joe Banner, we have got to discuss the Phillies. And if you want to discuss them after we're done with Joe Banner, I'll put out a link sometime during Joe Banner. And if you want to join, feel free. You can cut the camera off if you're sensitive about being on screen and just talk to me. But I am going to address a lot of things with the Phillies. We're going to do that. Obviously, there's going to be more to talk more to talk to you about the draft. And that's after Joe Banner. We're going to do that. There's a couple of things that I really have some issues with. I really, really do have some issues with when it comes to baseball. And we're going to talk about that as well. And then there's an hilarious moment that you may or may not have seen on TV, and we're going to play that for you too. But before we do that, I want to talk about our wonderful partners, sponsors, partners. I've become really, really knowledgeable about what they do and understand what they do. And that would be, first of all, Piazza Property Pros, Cut the Cord with Jason, and Audi of Westchester. But let me first discuss Piazza Property Pros, because it's getting to be that time of the year. You notice the weather's getting a little better. Here on the East Coast, you may be watching. Actually, we've had people from around the world watch the show. I've had responses from India, from Australia, but they're not coming over there to do your pool. But if you want any kind of pool for the summer, you want restoration of your pool, you want landscaping. See, the good thing about Piazza Property Pros, and you see the number there, the good thing about Piazza Property Pros is 25 years of experience. That's a real good thing. All the work they do, whether it's on your pool, whether it's restoration, whether it's your landscaping, whatever it may be, are their own people. They don't subcontract anything. They do it themselves. You can trust Piazza Property Pros for exceptional results within your budget. They'll discuss everything with you. Here's a number: 610-566-2608. That's 610-566-2608, or on the internet, piazzaoutdoor.com. Don't wait. Piazza Property Pros is waiting to make your summer a very enjoyable one. Then You want to drive in. We always want to drive in a nice car. We want to feel comfortable. We've got to go places. We've got to do things. You can experience luxury at Audi Westchester, and their all new facility is terrific. State of the art equipment, great, very, very nice people. Audi Westchester's goal is to make buying or leasing a new Audi as simple as possible with pressure-free sales environment. Now, since Audi of Westchester is part of the mainline automotive group, you will also have access to the largest selection of both new and pre-owned Audi vehicles in the tri-state area. Can't miss. Stop by Audi Westchester, located at 1421 Wilmington Pike, or check them out on the internet, AudiWestchester.com, AudiWestchester.com. But let me tell you right now, still no tariffs, $5,000 off the EQ5, that's the hybrid, and $3,000 off the A5. So you got good deals, good people, and good cars, and a terrific dealership. All right, now you want to save money, lots of money, maybe hundreds of dollars a month with cutting the cord with Jason. Now, Jason offers an incredible service that will save you money. He'll come out to your house, cut your cable off, and right off the bat, you're going to start saving money, set you up with less expensive internet service and with streaming services. And people have really taken advantage of Jason's ability to hook you up. It'll include all your local and national channels. You'll still get to see all your Philadelphia pro games. Maybe you don't want to watch the baseball team right now, but whatever, you can still watch them. They're all there. And let's say you have a second home down the shore or wherever, Jason can set up anything you want, one monthly TV bill for both houses. No extra charge for the second house. For more information and to save yourself a lot of money, call Jason today. And here is the number: 215 801 5858. That's 215 801 5858. And here on the Howard Eskin Show, presented by Stillwell Financial Advisors, is a guy that I respected, still respect. Not everybody in Philadelphia understood how much respect they should have for him. Smart guy, but it's some people in Philadelphia just don't understand that. And that would be Joe Banner. He was president, I didn't realize it was this long, of the Eagles for 11 years, and then the CEO of the Cleveland Browns for a while as well. Joe, before we get into anything else, are you doing anything specifically now other than just rambling on Twitter?
If that's what you call it, yeah. No, I've started a couple of businesses, sports related. Started the 33rd Team website with Mike Tannenbaum, and there's a B2B product from that site that we're starting to sell to teams. Started a venture capital fund with a group of other people that serves professional athletes only. And then I do some individual consulting work for some of the teams in the league. No more than I wanted, which is the great part of it. So I can take it easy, or I can work whenever I want.
So wait a minute. If you're working for some of the teams, any of the teams have a problem that you consult for some of the teams and not just one of the teams?
I mean, it depends upon the assignment. I mean, sometimes it's, cap related, and sometimes it's stadium related. A lot of times, most common thing I get hired for is team building philosophies and how to approach it, what works, what doesn't, how franchises have actually turned themselves around, and how some are pretended. So it's a variety of products. Like, I have to be careful. I monitor myself to make sure there's not kind of an overlap where I'm working on same thing in essence for two different teams. But it's not that hard to do because I'm really not trying to do too much.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm going to take people back to the beginning of when I knew Joe Banner, and people just don't understand this, which is kind of interesting. You were a sports reporter when I first met you in 1976. Why did you want to become and it was at WCAU radio at the time, 1210. It's now, the call letters are now WPHT. And then you went back home, I think, to start a business. Where did you want to become a sports reporter, and why did you get out of it?
So I was went to the college in the Midwest that had a program in Philadelphia where you could take a semester, what they called it was an urban semester. And you took some courses locally with some of the other people in the program, and you got an internship for which you got credit. And my internship turned out to be at WCAU, and that's when we first met. And after the end in that internship, they actually offered me a job to not go back to college and stay, which I took and stayed in Philadelphia for a couple of years, which I thoroughly enjoyed, before coming back many, many years later with Jeff Lurie. So that was my original entry into the Philadelphia market and broadcasting. You know, ironically, because this ended up not being reality, I got a broadcast because I realized that I was either going to be working every weekend or I wasn't going to be very successful. And I didn't like either choice. So I got out of broadcasting. Ironically, I ended up back into things that made me work every weekend. So I really left for no good reason. But that was my thinking at the time, was that I cared deeply about having a family, having kids. I didn't want to be working every single weekend as people like you ended up doing. But I ended up doing that anyway, just not in broadcasting.
You know what? It kind of, I think it sort of opened the door for me, because we worked together for 3 weeks, which is, and then I replaced you as the sports reporter early in my career at WCAU Radio at 1210 at the time. So you opened up the door for me to start the ball rolling. So I guess I should thank you for that, to get the hell out of town.
You used to tell the story occasionally when I was in town, and inevitably I would get a call then. So Howard's your fault? There wouldn't have been a Howard if it wasn't for you. And I tried to deny that, but as you just expressed, there is some truth in that, just a speckle, but there's truth in it.
Wow. All right. So then you go back to the New England area, and then the next time that I get to see you, you come with Jeff Lurie. How did that come about, that Jeffrey Lurie brought you here when he purchased the Eagles?
So it's a mystery to me too, which is the funny part. Jeff and I were good friends. We weren't best friends. I mean, I say it like we were at each other's weddings, but we weren't in each other's weddings, is the way I kind of described the friendship. And frankly, out of the blue, he called me up. I was actually away. He left a message on what used to be a box that they had, next to your phone that kept messages, because we didn't have cell phones. Hate to date both of us, but we didn't have cell phones. And he left me a message. He said, I've been dreaming for years about buying a sports team. I'm finally going to try to do it. I'd love to have you help me work on the acquisition. And if it goes well, then come and help me run the team. What do you think? And so I was actually away. So for like a week, he's wondering, why the hell isn't he calling me back? This is a phenomenal offer. I'm not even. But when I did call him back and he explains the situation, honestly, it took about a quarter of a second to say, I'm all in. So we worked on what turned out to be an attempted acquisition of the Patriots, bidding against Bob Kraft. And Bob eventually prevailed. And Jeff and I at that point decided to check what other teams were available. Lo and behold, the Eagles they put it not really available, but if you made the right offer, maybe it would become available, which is, a way of telling you that's for sale. So here we are all these years later. That's how it started.
When you look back, okay, you guys came in '94. That's when he purchased the team. And I think Rich Kotite was the head coach, if I'm not mistaken, which was a mess. What a shame that was. So then, how did I think the first hire you made was Ray Rhodes, correct? As the head coach. So how did that come about?
So we took over the team in June. Jeff and I had decided we weren't going to do a thing until at least January. Observe, learn what we could, try to get some relationships built around the league. And then see what change we need to make or not. And we did make the decision. It was an odd season. We started 7-2 and ended up 7-9. And at 7-2, Rich came in and asked for a contract extension. We said, listen, we just got here. We're not doing any contract extensions, but let's see where we are in January. And then we can see. When we lost 7 straight games after we said that. I'm sure in Rich's mind it was because of that, but we didn't really see it that way. We went through a traditional, at that point, coaching search. And we were focused on things that, in hindsight, we now know, and I think the Eagles, even during my time and since, have proven, we were looking for the wrong things in a head coach. No disrespect to Ray Rhodes, but for example, we put a huge emphasis on the fact that he came from a winning program. And, it's nice to have somebody come from a winning program, but it isn't really predictive. We've seen that a lot with the Patriots coaching hires, and seen people come off that 49ers staff and the Dallas staff haven't necessarily had the same success as the original head coach. So we hired Ray, 4 years. He did get to the playoffs twice, actually won a playoff game one of those years. But on the fourth year, we only won three games and decided it was time to make a change.
Yeah, I thought Ray was good for a while, and then when it's time. I mean, there's an expiration date on everybody, and there was on Andy Reid, but there was time. So now here comes the next guy, the next coach that you hired. And I remember Ray Rhodes told me, and I went to the Super Bowl, and I remember where it was. It was in San Diego, and Andy Reid was with the Green Bay Packers. So Ray said, why don't you say hello? He was still the coach. Why don't you say hello to Andy Reid? I didn't know all these changes were going to happen. Why don't you say hello to Andy Reid? And Andy remembers this. He's sitting at a table all by himself. I forget what he coached at that time with the Packers, sitting at a table, reading a newspaper, which nobody does anymore anyway, read a newspaper. And I sit down, I introduce myself. And a couple months later, he's the head coach of the Eagles. And he remembers the story. Now, he kind of he's the best coach in football now, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, clearly the best, he's better than Belichick by far. So how did it come about? Here's a guy that's an assistant with Green Bay. Ray thought he was really good. Apparently, you and Jeffrey Lurie thought he was really good. How did that come about where you hired Andy Reid as your head coach?
So this is kind of an interesting story and why sometimes experience is overrated. Because the league dictated that if you were never an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, or a former head coach, you didn't have the qualifications to be a head coach. So we did something predictable for us, but not the rest of the league. We did a study of every head coach that had made it to 2 Super Bowls and what did they have in common before we did any interviews, did anything. Interestingly, when it came to football, we could not find any real commonalities that explained their success. Some were offensive, defensive guys, younger guys, older guys, aggressive, passive, run, pass. It was all over the place. We accidentally realized, though, because that was what we were focused on, the football part of what was the same, that if you went below the surface a little bit to non-football things like character and just description of who they were, that they're actually extremely similar people. I mean, everybody knows they were phenomenal leaders. That was not news. But some of the other things were, like they were all phenomenal at hiring other coaches and managing them. They were all incredibly principled. They didn't have the same philosophy, but they had a philosophy that they were very committed to, that they had thought about, they studied. And the way we viewed it, they weren't going to be talked out of it by some, interfering owner or president or media or a bad start to us, whatever it was. They were very committed to their beliefs. They were all so anal and so, detail oriented that they drove everybody around them crazy. So we had this list. It literally had 8 things on it that we thought all of these coaches, I was talking Joe Gibbs, Parcells, Bill Walsh's, that caliber coach. We thought all of them had that in common. And we weren't looking for somebody just, nudge into the playoffs here and there. We wanted a guy who was going to go to Super Bowls and ultimately try to win them. So that changed everything, because then instead of doing the normal, what offenses are really successful, which defense are really successful, we started asking, players, agents, even media people, everybody, do you know anybody in the league? We don't care what their current job is that has these characteristics, the detail orientation, the philosophical commitment, blah, blah, blah. And frankly, we only got a couple of names back because nobody was thinking about it that way. So Andy was in Green Bay. He'd been there for 8 years. There were 8 teams looking for a head coach. Green Bay was one of them. They have a Hall of Fame general manager who's been working with Andy for 8 years. He didn't even interview him because he'd never been a coordinator or a head coach. By the way, 30 years later, and I certainly agree with you, Andy's the best coach in football. Even with his success, no one is deviating from that model still. But anyway, that's what set up when we asked a totally different question, like who are the best leaders? Who is so obsessed with every little detail that they drive people around them crazy? We literally asking people, do you know anybody that looks like this? And we got back Andy's name and interviewed him. And, everybody knows a lot of the stories from that. But it was no doubt after the interview that if we had the right criteria, he was going to be very successful because he checked every box to an extreme.
He's detail oriented is what one of his qualities. He's got many qualities. And now, you talk because there's so many people in Kansas City that work with the Eagles, and I stay in touch with some of them. I stay in touch with a few of the assistant coaches and the trainer and whatever. And the one thing that he's got going, and I don't know that I realized it enough when he was at the Eagles, it is hard for a head coach to get the players to respect him, all, a majority of them, or all of them, and like him. It's hard to get both. And in Kansas City, and I guess they would do it here, and I was maybe too close to it to realize the players do both for him. I mean, how hard is it to get? I mean, obviously, you've looked at head coaches, and when you were with Cleveland, I don't know if you were part of the process to maybe look for a head coach. How hard is it to get a head coach to be respected and liked by the players?
Yeah, almost impossible, which is why we have so few coaches in the conversation about should they go in the Hall of Fame? Who are the best coaches in the league right now? Mm-hmm. At the moment, I'm incredibly proud of the fact that if you looked around the league, almost all the people that fit what you just said came through the Eagles. And if you look at the best teams in the league, they're following kind of the system, we collectively created in Philadelphia. So it goes beyond Andy. I mean, obviously you have the success the Eagles have had in recent years. You got what's going on in Buffalo, which is replication of that. You got John Harbaugh down in Baltimore doing it. You've even got Sean Payton up to Denver doing a version of that. So, we've produced, and I think probably two of the best, some may argue the two best general managers, which here in Philadelphia and then in Kansas City. There are a couple of other guys in the mix, but those are certainly two of the best general managers, if not the two best general managers. So they all came through this, and you're right. They have a uniqueness in their ability to do a set of things, and one is to be both respected and liked at the same time. Once you have that, you don't really have to spend a lot of time working on motivating the players. It just naturally flows, especially if you have some quality leadership on the team that's reinforcing what you're describing, we found in a head coach.
One of the areas that people didn't like about Andy, and I was okay with it because, he would explain things to me, know that I wouldn't reveal full detail. He's yelled at me a couple of times. Some of the stories are really funny, but he didn't want to, and I want coaches to explain what the problem is. Andy and I would want that, and Andy didn't do it, and that's why I don't think people in Philadelphia appreciate it. I want to say don't like or dislike, didn't appreciate him because at news conferences, he really didn't explain anything on what a problem was. And I'll give you an instance. And he got mad at me for diming the guy out, but I could see when I'm down on the field what happened. They always blamed him for time management. So it was inside the 10, I guess around the 10-yard line. And Donovan McNabb's the quarterback, and the play clock's running down, and Andy has to run down and call timeout. Oh, time management. He got the play in too late. Then I find out, I said, something happened there because Donovan's pointing to L.J. Smith. Something happened there that wasn't right. So I checked, and I found out that L.J. Smith was lined up incorrectly, and Donovan's trying to move him. And by the time he gets him to where he's supposed to be, the play clock's too low, and Andy calls a timeout. So then I explained that on the air, that I found out that L.J. Smith, and he yelled at me. I don't have any problem. 30 seconds later, we're laughing. But he yelled at me, why did you have to say, because that's what happened. You're getting blamed. He said, I don't care if I get blamed. Right. I don't want to dime out a player. Did you always agree with that when Andy wouldn't explain some of the things? And then people went, of course, in this town with WIP and with the people and whatever, they went crazy. Did you guys always agree with the way he did it?
I mean, the answer for me is simply yes. Now, that doesn't mean we didn't understand there was some consequence to it. But our attitude was kind of simple. When all is said and done, if we're winning, they're going to like us. And if we're not, they're not. So everything we do, including PR, should be driven by that and nothing else. So there were times where we took PR hits knowing it, or he took PR hits, that we collectively took PR hits. We did the same thing with contracts. We knew that the players needed to perceive that Andy was engaged, but he could never look like the bad guy in a player contract. So we purposely, set it up both publicly and privately so that would never happen. And frankly, it's one of the reasons, go back to what you said a few minutes ago, he was both liked and respected. The players knew, not that he was going to say he had their back, but he was going to have their back. So he was going to, over-own whatever didn't go well, really to protect the players. And truthfully, they appreciated it. So it was worth it. Probably not him personally, or me personally, or Donovan, some of the lightning rods that, took the heat for that kind of stuff. But in terms of winning and losing, to this day, I believe it was one of the reasons we were able to have the success we did.
You know what was interesting? There's so many interesting facets of when you were with the Eagles and things that happened. The year that I know you remember this, the year that Donovan McNabb was drafted. What a farce and what a joke were those morons that went up, and they were total 30 friggin' morons that went up to the draft. Ricky Williams. And I remember you telling me before the draft, Ricky Williams isn't even the best running back in the draft.
Right.
It was Edgerrin James.
Yeah.
So that was a farce. And you took Donovan McNabb, and then in the second pick, Couch was a stiff. Achilles Smith right after him was a stiff. He was the right guy.
Right.
With all that going on, how did that come about?
It's the same edict that led to it that I mentioned a moment ago. If we just focus on doing what will lead to winning, either we're doing a bad job and it's not going to happen, or these people end up fine with things. It doesn't mean they're going to love me or Andy or any of those people, but they're going to care and they're going to be passionate and they're going to have a lot of fun. So you're right. We didn't have Ricky Williams even as our top-rated running back. We had Edgerrin James as the top running back in that draft. I think their careers proved that was the right grade. And we were never picking anything but a quarterback. There were 5 quarterbacks picked in the top 12. There was a lot of debate, by the way, about which one. I mean, Andy and myself.
Cade McNown had a lot of
choose. Yeah. Well, Culpepper, too.
Yep.
A couple of the, Brad Childress and Rod Dowhauer, who were there at the time, passionately supported Culpepper. There were other people, myself and Andy, who were McNabb. But it was one of those quarterbacks we were going to pick. That was never a doubt in the building. All the rest of the stuff that was going on in the public and the media, WIP and everything was totally dead to us. It was just which quarterback we were going to pick. Now, of course, we grade everybody, so we did have Edgerrin James. And had we somehow picked a running back, it would have been Edgerrin James, which would have been a crazier scene than what ended up happening, I think. If we'd actually picked a running back but not Ricky Williams, I hate to think what would have happened. So for us, it was always which quarterback. And really, we had Donovan as number 1. If we'd had the first pick in that draft, it would have been Donovan, and we had Culpepper as number 2, and we had Achilles Smith as number 3. But we have Donovan collectively, when we're all done with the debating and going back and forth and researching character, putting him on the board, everything else, we clearly went into the draft knowing we were picking Donovan if he was there.
When you look at the draft, and I know you looked at it, and I really respect the knowledge you have about personnel, and a lot of people didn't give you credit for that. I could just tell in talking to you. I mean, the problem with a lot of people, they don't really talk to you and find out really why you're thinking this, why are you thinking that. But quarterbacks selected in the top 10, half of them don't make it. Running backs, I think, are a bigger problem because if they're going to a team in the top 10, they obviously so many other things. When you broke down the philosophy of picking high, what were primary in your thoughts in the way you pick a player, especially in the top 10?
Yeah, and you look back at the history, anybody would be able to answer this question, and you and I have talked about it, and we were the same as they are today. We wanted to get a good quarterback and then dominate the lines. And we felt like if we dominated the lines, we were at least good and within reach of any team in the league. So simple for us. Passing game was key, one of the things Andy took a lot of heat for. Mm-hmm. Protecting the quarterback or pressuring the quarterback would be the key to the outcome of the game. So we, from the beginning, we traded, picked Mike Mamula at the beginning. Didn't turn out to be a great pick even before Andy, but it reflected the philosophy that we stuck with. And you see to this day, I think the Eagles' success is driven by as much of the discipline they still have, but that's the right teaming building philosophy, as anything else that they've done, or frankly, we did. So, you look at our first round picks, you'll see that a misproportionate number of them are offensive or defensive linemen. Because until those were totally built out with depth, we didn't think anything else was important. So we were ironic. I think we're still the only team that would phrase this way. We never picked for need, but we did pick with position priorities in mind. So we felt the easiest way to make a mistake was just pick a player to fill the need. So oftentimes you weren't really filling the need. You were tricking yourself into thinking you filled the need just because you picked somebody that played that position. So we were always trying to pick to fill our team building philosophy priorities, but we were never picking just for a need. And I think that was one of the reasons that we were able to build out those units so successfully, with some mistakes to be sure, but less than most.
All right. Well, one of them was, and there was a reason for it, apparently. Mike Mull's a great guy, but he wasn't better than Warren Sapp. Were there too many red flags on Warren Sapp? Is that kind of why you didn't go with Warren Sapp there?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some character concerns, but we also thought defensive end was a lot more important than defensive tackle. I think that's gotten closer over the years, but at the time we thought there was a gap. We thought they were both very good players, but Mamula came with no character questions, in our opinion, and played what we thought was a slightly more important position. But he was, a mistake. So, he was a solid player. He was a very good guy, but picking him where we did not match, his production. And we learned from it. So we overemphasized some of the measurables in that draft. We overemphasized the value of competition against really good other college players. We learned some things from that mistake, which I hope we did that a lot, because we definitely made mistakes like everybody does. I mean, the GMs that go in the Hall of Fame are hitting about 50% of their major decisions correctly. So you're going to get a lot wrong. You just want to minimize that number, and every time you do, see if you can learn something so that it gets less and less likely over time.
Okay, so now we're coming up on the draft. What are the last 24 hours like, and what is it like when you get into the draft and everybody's trying to jump around and say, well, if that player's available, you've already talked to a team, and can we do this? And what is it like? What is and I'll call it chaos, controlled chaos. What is it like right before the draft?
Well, the irony is the last 24 hours are as calm and peaceful as any 24 hours in the whole year. Because you're basically done. I mean, we used to take the afternoon off. The draft used to be Saturday. We used to take the afternoon off on Fridays. Just go home, take a nap, relax, clear your head. Obviously, the decision makers, we got the board, we got it in order. But you want to just think through some of the hypotheticals, which we had done as a group for probably a week, 2 weeks sometimes, leading up to the draft. So ironically, the last day is actually one of the calmer days in the whole year. You've done the work. You don't want to change everything at the last minute because you could do it for the wrong reasons. Trust all the work you put in, the scouts put in for the year was worth it. You've ended up with a board that is going to have some mistakes, but you hope overall has the right players in the right places. And we tried to stay that calm, disciplined in the draft. Now, that's not always as easy because, things cross you up. And at the last minute, it's ironic because he ended up winning a Super Bowl. But Nick Foles was a great story of this, and a lot of people have heard it. We were in that draft totally determined to come out of that draft with Russell Wilson as our quarterback of the future.
I remember.
And we did so much research, and everybody that had any context talked to everybody, because we didn't want to pick him in the first round because we knew he wasn't going to get picked there, and why not add as many good players as we could. And we ended up collectively deciding that if we picked him in the mid-third round, we were very safe. We would definitely get him. And so we get to the 5 picks, I think, in front of us, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, Seattle picks him. And we are, because by the time you get to the third round, who's going to actually be there is so up in the air. You can't be that focused on a player. But in this case, we were. And he got picked, and we were just like, holy shit, what do we do now? Because we weren't usually sitting there, okay, here are the 4 or 5 guys left that we like. Let's talk it through at the last minute. Anybody have any doubts, any questions, any last-minute information on injuries, character, any of that kind of stuff? And then you just pick one of the 5, which in our case was usually the top-rated guy of those 5, unless it was somebody who was not a lineman compared to somebody who was a lineman. Then we would shift the order slightly to pick the lineman, but only if we had good grades on both. So all of a sudden, we were just sitting there, I would say as kind of unprepared for that moment as any I saw us in any draft, because we prided ourselves in attention to detail and preparedness. And we're sitting there talking, well, who should we think about here? Who should we put up on the board? And we were now at our pick, still deciding, which 5 players should we be focused on here to pick one of them. And Andy, just out of the blue, I forget, because you have a board in front of you with these magnetized names of everybody in the audience. So Andy instructed whoever was taking that and handing it to the person who was on the phone in New York. He said, hey, take Nick Foles' name down. We weren't even considering Nick Foles. There was nobody in the room that was thinking about Nick Foles. We all had other names we were going to pick from now that Wilson was gone. And Andy just said, you know what, guys? I came in here, and we all came in here wanting to get a quarterback. I know not everybody in the room likes him as much as I do, but I really like Nick Foles. And he says to the guy, give the telephone guy that card, which is what his name is on, and tell New York that's who we're picking. There was no discussion. There was no debate. There was no consensus. It was out of character for any pick we ever made in all the years Andy was there. And we put in Nick Foles' name and walked away with a quarterback. Obviously, not Russell Wilson, didn't have the career we hoped, but in the meantime, was a quarterback of a Super Bowl winning team in Philadelphia. So a crazy story, very unlike how we handled most draft picks in the time I was there.
It seems like the philosophy is still the same. And you mentioned the lines of scrimmage. It seems like priority are the lines of scrimmage. And now the Eagles, because they lost some defensive players, especially on the line of scrimmage, that appears to be a focus. Now, are they going to be able to get the player where they draft? So was that been a philosophy since you were there, that the lines of scrimmage are really, other than the quarterback, maybe the most important?
Yeah, listen, that started in our interviewing of Andy. I mean, at the time, it was something Jeff and I were passionate about. We diverged a little bit. I stayed very disciplined about that. Jeff cared about that, but got impatient with not getting better kind of offensive weapons, which you saw that somewhat of a shift over the years with that. But it was always, from the time I got there and then Andy got there, we were going to dominate the line of scrimmage. Whatever we had to do that, we just felt like without that, you were very vulnerable. You can't advance deep in the playoffs if you're playing a team with a good offensive line and you just have an okay defensive line. Teams that are good enough to get to that position will beat you consistently if that's the matchup. It's what happened in this year's Super Bowl. I mean, I was telling people going into the week of the Super Bowl, the Eagles were going to win handily. There was no way Kansas City could block their defensive line. And by the way, I'm not sure that what people are thinking about the Eagles' priority is right in this draft.
Go ahead.
Talking just philosophically now, not names. I mean, I think they think, and I happen to agree with them, that they've lost players on defense that are good and played well for them and helped get them where they were last year. But they have guys there that were starting to play more and more as the season went on that can already step in and did in this playoff run this year and some of the season, playing more as time was going on. But if you look at the young defensive linemen they have, and I'm not a huge Davis fan, but I am talking about, the Carters and the Hunts and the my mind is slipping a couple of names now. The first round pick in the same year they picked Carter.
Who, Davis?
Yeah, no, I'm not Davis. The guy they picked at like 28 or 30. For crying out loud.
Nolan Smith. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you watch Smith as the season went on, I'll be flabbergasted if he doesn't come back as one of the best pass rushers in the NFL next year. They picked Hunt in the third round last year. It looked really good in the latter part of the season, still not playing a ton. So I think it's a priority. I think they feel very set at the offensive line, at least for the immediate future. And even if you look 3 or 4 years out, they may have to replace Lane Johnson, but the rest of that line is set under contract for a long time at reasonable prices. I mean, they're going to have a dominant offensive line now for a really long time.
All
they
right.
still have a little bit to do to make sure that same statement is true about the defensive line.
Okay. The Eagles or Howie is, or somebody is, it seems like they always want to trade up in the first round, and they have draft picks, but I don't know if they have enough. What would it take, and I'll use it as a hypothetical question, to go where they are to get into the top 5? And I think everybody loves Abdul Carter, but whatever. What would it take to get a player like that to go from where they are? I mean, Kansas City pulled off a miracle going from 27 to 11 to get Mahomes, and that took a lot. What does it take to move up with the analysis of what the value is to get up into the top 10 from where they are?
Well, if you remember, you're old as we are. I mean, Atlanta did this many, many years ago for a wide receiver. Turned out to be a great player. Of course, they never won a Super Bowl because I think it was a misplacement of all those assets into one position, because they did hit on the player, big time hit on the player. It's multiple ones and twos. And I don't even know if that gets you there. Because remember, the first thing that has to happen for that to even be a possibility is for a team to be willing to trade out. And out, not like we're going to move from 2 to 6, which a lot of teams will at least contemplate if the compensation's right. But am I going to go from 2 or 3 to 32? I mean, honestly, I don't even think it's, a possibility. I would just give it up if I was an Eagles fan and was hoping for that. But I also think the Eagles would agree with me that their need on defensive line, there's still some work to be done to have long-term guaranteed dominant defensive line. But that line is in much better shape than most people out there think based on the players they lost. but they're not looking as closely at the people they have ready to replace them. Listen, Ojami, played really well last year when he was in there for Williams or Tavis, and I think giving more play time, he'll be really good. And you have Carter, Davis, and Ojami. That's as good a rotation at defensive tackle as there is in the league. You get the same thing if you think of Smith the way I do, and Hunt's progress and some of the other people that they're playing, at the defensive position last year. They're already one of the best defensive lines in the league before they even make any additions. So I don't even think they would necessarily contemplate making that dramatic a move for another defensive end. But if they did, it's multiple ones and multiple twos.
All right. So for the Eagles, if you had to look at this and say, all right, what position, first of all, do you think the Eagles are going to trade up in the first round, whether it's in the top 10 or it's in the 20, lower in the 20s, based on their history and what they like to do? Would you give more than a 50% chance that they would move up in the first round?
My own opinion is the most likely thing for the Eagles to do in this draft is trade back.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's going to piss off people in Philadelphia because that's the last pick in the draft and there'll be no first round pick. The first night. Oh my God, can you imagine this town?
Yeah, but just remember, there's been a lot of things over the years that the fans have been pissed off about that turned out pretty good.
They really are not the experts. They're far from it, as we saw with Donovan McNabb. All right. So now, so you think they're going to move back to that? Eliminates my second question. What do you think? Because you need every position eventually. If you had to pick a position, not specifically a player, especially if you're going to move back, what do you think the Eagles, and I know you look at them, what do you think the Eagles would do position-wise in the draft for their first pick, whenever it may be?
This is very hard to say because we're more picking now to build out priorities than needs, even if you include the team building philosophy that they have. I think the teams that are early in the second round that may want to pick a quarterback, late in that first round to get, the fifth year in the contract and a little longer term to evaluate them and develop them, are likely to make a big enough offer. The Eagles are sitting there without needing to pick a particular player or position. So why not take the extra assets? Now, I think the other thing they're going to try to do is add more future assets of draft picks, even though I know I have 10 this year and 10 next year. I think they're going to be in a position with the roster, the cap situation, the quality of things they care about, that adding some future picks. So I don't know if they'll do that with a 32nd pick or do that with something later, but I do think they're going to want to add future picks higher if possible. Listen, I still think they need a nickel corner, depending upon some development that may or may not be true. I think that they do need another defensive lineman, although I don't think it's a priority. I think there's a good chance they need a tight end when they get there. They obviously need a nickel slot wide receiver. So I think the idea of picking up one of those, what they would consider, and I would agree, kind of a second tier position priority for them, and an extra pick or picks would be the best use of that 32nd pick, unless somebody slips to them that they really have a high grade on, and they actually can honestly say, we never thought he'd be here, which they say no matter what. But every team, that actually does happen sometimes. So if somebody slipped there, I could see them staying and making the pick. Otherwise, I think it's back, and whatever player fills one of those spots that I just mentioned.
Joe, you were with the Eagles when you guys did a masterful job of manipulating, and I'll use the word it may not be the right word, the salary cap. How the hell can you keep on signing these players, and then they just signed Cam Jurgens, and they have two wide receivers making over $50 million between them? How can they how can you manage it like that? How does that work?
Yeah, and listen, they've maintained a lot of what we did, although they've changed a few with respect to this specific question. And the answer is stay very disciplined. A lot of teams sign everybody they have that's a good player until they run out of money. The Eagles don't do that. They sign players that fit their philosophy about team building, what correlates to winning. So, 2 years ago, people forget the Eagles lost 7 starters. They weren't quality starters. They weren't at hugely important positions, but they lost 7 starters. This year, they lost 5 quality starters. Now, they've drafted well enough recently that they have depth at those key positions that, there'll be a little bit of a step back, but if some of the younger players develop the way they think they can. So when I was there, we had a goal of keeping 20, on average, about 20 of our 22 starters each year. So we had continuity and continue to have cap flexibility. And that's what I think they've done. So you see, it's really rare. Like, they would not have let those defensive linemen this year leave if they didn't have other people they believed in. They would have found a way to keep them. And if you look at the history, literally 30 years, and certainly Howie's entire reign, they're signing key players, high talent, at the positions they think are most important. So you don't see them, I mean, they did this year, but you don't see them historically putting a lot of money into re-signing a linebacker, re-signing a safety, re-signing, an interior offensive lineman, unless they were really good. So when they got to Kelson, they said, no, this is not a replaceable center, even though most centers are. Now they got the Juergens, the same thing. Dickerson, they made him the highest paid guard in the league. So it looks like they're doing something other teams aren't in terms of how many players they sign, but what they're actually doing better than other teams is being disciplined about which players to sign and which players they can actually move on from and not take a major hit to the quality of the roster.
It's really kind of amazing the way this all works. All right, so now there's how much names are floated out there, and I know AJ Brown's name has been out there. I don't know if it was serious, but the name is floated. When a team starts looking around and say, what would it take to get up there? How much did you, and do you think teams just kind of float names and say, well, let's see who will bite? Do you kind of do that to kind of test the waters?
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, it can come from the other team. It can come from the agent. It can come from you. I mean, it's considered part of the strategy to kind of put bluffs out there. It's like, teams don't think of it as lying. It's like you're playing poker. You're allowed to bluff. That's considered part of the strategy of the game. And I think most teams think of, how they, and I don't take offense to the word manipulate, how they manipulate these situations, doing things like bluffing about who they might be interested or not. And listen, teams out there are motivated to try to create some internal discord, on the Eagles roster. They got to find some way to get better, and they don't seem to be doing it by scheme or drafting or utilizing the cap. So my own personal opinion is that's a long shot, but I don't think it's totally off the table that he'd be somebody they moved. I can't imagine them doing it unless they felt they had another top-tier quality wide receiver, because that's clearly these days part of their team-building philosophy that they prioritize. So I think that was a lot of talk, unlikely to lead to much action, but we'll know in a few days.
But the name gets floated out there to see, well, maybe they're interested. But you float names out there all the time.
Absolutely. Names get floated. It's always, hey, did somebody in our building leak that? Or where the hell did that come from? And sometimes there's some truth in it. So you may have been quietly asking somebody, hey, would you have any interest in AJ Brown? But doing it really quietly because you're afraid if it got back to him, he may feel, offended.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, it's in the newspaper, and the odds are you're going to have a call from an agent. Hey, my guy saw this in the paper. Is this, shoot me straight. Is this really going on? And of course, the answer is always no to that question. And usually the answer really is no. But occasionally it is yes, and you can't really say that.
All right. One last question. I think it's the last question. Nick Sirianni, I think, is a good coach. And you know what happens here in Philadelphia. They start out 2-2, and everybody wants to get rid of him. They want to bring in Belichick. They want to do all these different things. What are you doing? This guy has the respect and the love of the players. Is he a little different? Maybe, but he's creative. Your thoughts on Nick Sirianni as a head coach?
I agree with everything you just said. When somebody doesn't look the part, there's a high risk they're going to get underrated. And if somebody was saying, oh, let's draw a picture and let's describe the characteristics and all the great head coaches you see, they're so calm on the sideline. You're like, what the hell? Wake them up, will you please? Now, they do it for their own strategic reason. Andy is not lacking in intensity on the sideline during the game. But if you just watched a picture of him, you'd think he was this vision of calmness. So Nick does not look the part. And if you look around the world, whether they're players, whether they're business leaders, whether they run charities, whether they're NFL head coaches, people that don't look the part are frequently underrated. And I think that fits Nick. He doesn't carry himself in the way. He doesn't look like your classic. He doesn't have the resume of your typical, extremely successful NFL head coach. So he's underestimated. And of course, there's all this knee-jerk reaction to short-term outcomes, like starting 2-2. And you put those two things together. To me, it's not surprising at all, but it has nothing to do with how good or bad a coach he is. It's just the way people who look at these things and critique them and second guess them tend to look at things.
It really is unbelievable. And hey, listen, Andy didn't have a problem with saying, "Hey, listen, I don't know that you should have said that," but respected here's what's different with some people. He respected the fact that at least I tried to find out what
Right.
was going on, and I rather than just spew it on the air and just oh yeah, we had no idea. And the people that are good people understand that, and we talked about it. After a game, I brought up something during one of the sideline reports, and he walks into the news conference and he says, "If you bring that up, you don't." No, he didn't say if. He says, "Don't bring that up in the news conference." So I walked into his office after the game. I said, "You just won the game by 20 some points. What are you doing here?" It's something that happened. I saw it. It wasn't. I didn't think it was a big deal. And like I said, 30 seconds later, we're laughing about it, and
No,
it's all good. I mean, that's who he is, and he's a great coach. And Joe, I really do appreciate you coming on. You have so much to talk about. You have so many stories to tell. It's fascinating and it's fun to talk to you about them, and I really do appreciate you coming on and doing this. And if they want to blame you for me, so be it. Because
I
you
took
left.
I took credit for you, so don't worry about it. Now, listen, I appreciate you saying that. It's mutual. I mean, what you just said was how we all perceived you. There were a lot of people with a lot of viewpoints that didn't put the work in to kind of justify them or base them on some truth versus just some knee-jerk thing. I certainly personally appreciated the fact that you did put in the work. You would practice all the time. Never felt like there was a time you were saying anything for any reason other than that was your honest opinion, whether we liked it or didn't like it or agreed or different. That was your own opinion, and you were entitled to it. So, mutual respect back to you.
All right. Hey, Joe, say hello to the family. And I want to we'll stay in touch because you're fascinating there's so many stories we didn't even touch on. We can go for hours with some of the stories, but it's fun. It was really fun. And I really do appreciate it. And enjoy the draft and have it. And the people in Philadelphia will always bitch about something. So we'll see what happens, what they bitch about on Thursday. Oh, you know what? I'd almost love to see the Eagles trade out and trade back. Let's see what happens here. All right. Thanks, Joe. I love
Be
it.
well. Take
All
it
right,
easy.
take you too. All right, take care. Joe Banner. It is so fascinating the things that happen, but he gave us a lot of good insight. And we're going to talk more about that, about what could happen, uh, in the draft. But again, I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Stillwell Financial Advisors. I'm telling you, talking to Jeff Stillwell is like talking to a guy that you've been talking to for 20 years. He's like you. He's like me. He's a real guy, but he does really well. If you have any desire in any wealth management that you want to invest, Jeff Stillwell Financial Advisors. And there's his number, 732-343-0813. Call him. He'll talk to you about it. I'm telling you, you will be as impressed as I am with Jeff as a regular guy. He's me, but he's a smart guy when it comes to investing for your future and investing your wealth. Jeff Stillwell at Stillwell Financial Advisors, and I suggest you do it. And Joe is so fascinating, but I want to talk about the draft. And I saw some comments, and I'll address them now. Actually, I see somebody wants to fire Rob Thompson. Hey, listen, if they don't play better, believe me, that John Middleton, and somebody wants me to get John Middleton on. He ain't talking to anybody right now, but he will get fired if they don't get better. But I'm going to address that. I saw a comment that they blame Joe Banner for letting Dawkins go. And I talked to both Joe, Andy Reid. He got too much money for that stage in his career. I guess it was Denver that he signed with. And he was hurt that year and he had some injuries and they were worried about that. That's why. And it wasn't Joe Banner. Andy Reid told me that he had talked to Dawkins and say, "Hey, listen, we love you. We wanted you to stay, but we can't pay that kind of money. It just doesn't work. with where you are in your career. And Andy Reid was probably his decision as much as anybody for the comment that somebody blamed Joe Banner. All right, before I want to talk about, or let me address the draft before I talk about our sponsors. All this nonsense, all these reports. I love the reports. Oh, Cleveland and the Giants are taking phone calls. They do that every year. It's not news. It's not information that you have. They're doing that as a part of what they do. These reports, oh, the Giants in Cleveland. Cleveland's got the second pick and Giants have the third pick. Oh, they're taking calls. Everybody takes calls. Is that news? It's such a joke. Qualified information, and a lot of those people are qualified by qualified people on mock drafts, all this other nonsense. Who knows what's going to happen? I think Tennessee is going to stay at number one and take the quarterback, Cam Ward. Cleveland's going to take Travis Hunter at number two because he's a really good player. And they're never going to get, I don't think, what you need to get to trade out of that pick. Although they do need a quarterback, but you can't make a stretch and get one there. And the Giants are probably going to take Abdul Carter, but the Giants always screw things up anyway. So who knows what they're going to do. And they might do it just knowing that the Eagles would like to get to probably get to New England to be able to get Abdul Carter, but they're not going to get him. And AJ Brown's name comes up, and AJ's got to stay off of social media, stop talking about how many great cars he has, because that's why people steal him anyway. But that's another story. But the draft is going to be really interesting. And there's a lot of things that are going to happen. And probably at 5 is when, all hell breaks loose in the draft. All right, and I want to talk about this baseball team. This baseball team in Philadelphia, I'm so tired of hearing what I'm hearing, but I'll get to that in a second. But first, let me tell you that you can experience luxury. If you want a great and a really, really good people, great car, Audi Westchester is the place. And their all new facility, state of the art equipment. Buying or leasing a car is really easy because the people are friendly. And you want to buy a pre owned car? Let me tell you something. Audi of Westchester, because they're part of the Mainline Automotive Group, have the largest selection of new and pre owned Audi vehicles in the tri state area. Right now, no tariffs, still no tariffs, $5,000 off the EQ5. That's the hybrid. It's a really beautiful midsize sedan, and $3,000 off the A5. So you want something that's really nice with nice people. Audi Westchester, located 1421 Wilmington Pike, Westchester. And if you want to check them out online, AudiWestchester.com. That's AudiWestchester.com. All right, cut the cord with Jason. Jason offers an incredible service that will save you lots of money on your. How many people are so tired of seeing, oh, here comes another increase on my cable bill? Yep. Well, get rid of that. Get rid of it. He'll come to your house. Jason would cut the cord. He will cut off your cable, set you up with less expensive, I say by hundreds of dollars, less expensive internet service and streaming services, which include local and national channels. So you'll still get all the Philadelphia pro games. You'll see all the national channels. And if you have a second home or want to set up a second home or second, let's say a family member, it's no extra charge. You can set up two and one monthly bill for two places. For more information and to save money, a lot of money, call Jason 215-801-5858, 215-801-5858. And summertime is, I don't know whether you'd call this summertime or not, but Piazza Property Pros, don't wait till the last minute, because then everybody waits till the last minute. You want to get a new pool. See how beautiful that pool is. You want to get a new pool. You want to do renovations on your pool, which I'm doing with Piazza and have done. Piazza Property Pros. That's who they are. 25 years of experience. They specialize in what you want. It's going to make your summer more enjoyable. And you want landscaping. You want pool maintenance. You want anything that you need around the house to maintain a beautiful home and a fun place. 25 years of experience, use all their own people. They don't subcontract. It's all their people. You can trust Piazza Property Pros for exceptional results and within your budget. Just talk to them. Well, you can figure it out. Here's a number to call: 610-566-2608. That's, you can schedule a free consultation. That's 610-566-2608. Check them out. PiazzaOutdoor.com on the internet. Piazza Property Pros. Make your backyard an oasis and you can have fun for the summer. All right. Have to address the Phillies. At the time that we're doing this program, the Phillies have lost 3 in a row, 4 in a row, 3 in a row to the Mets. They don't win in New York because they don't win a lot of places now because they don't score runs. I hate to break your heart, but since those 2 bad teams they played in the first 2 series, the Phillies have a losing record. And you know why? Because they don't put the ball in play enough. They try to hit home runs and they're not hitting home runs. When they don't hit home runs, they don't score runs. They don't score with runners on third base in less than 2 outs. And here's something that really, really, really drives me crazy. Drives me absolutely nuts. Rob Thompson, after the third straight loss to the Mets, he says, going through a little bit of a slump. After the game, he says, we're going through a little bit of a slump, a little bit of a slow stretch. No, you're not hitting. And I don't know. It's not anything he can do. He finally has started the leadoff spot, which it took him 2 years after I told, whether I told him or I mentioned it. And I did tell him when I had him on the air with me. I said, Stott's got to start Turner. But the problem now is Turner's not hitting. He's hitting 250 or 260. Harper's not hitting. He's hitting 250 or 260. And they're just not. JT Realmuto, in his prime, was a terrific catcher. And defensively, he's still a good catcher. But he's not a real good hitter anymore. He'll get some hits once in a while. I don't like their lineup, and their bullpen sucks. Their bullpen just flat out sucks. I don't know what they thought they were going to do. When you lose with Wheeler on the mound, as they did in the third game against the Mets, you're in trouble because you don't win those games. You're in trouble. And then, as we speak, they're going to Chicago, and the Cubs are playing well. I hate to break your heart that the Phillies are not a World Series team. Now, not right now. Are they going to do anything to become a World Series team? Maybe. I don't know. They're still a little too undisciplined at the plate. In the third game against the Mets, they had 2 runs before they give them a baseball now gives you a runner to put on second base, and they scored a run. And the reason they scored the run is because they gave them the runner. But the Mets beat the Phillies in that third game with a 2-out base hit. And that's what the Phillies don't do enough of. And they don't make contact with men on third base in less than 2 outs. I see a comment here. The media asks Topper softball questions. He says, we need you back, Howard, to ask the tough questions. And I would, but that's another story for another time. The Phillies don't credential podcasters. Covered the team for so long, it's longer than anybody else there. Baseball writers can be out of work for 20 years. But if you're a baseball writer, you get a credential for life. I mean, it's ridiculous. Now, half the teams in baseball do credential podcasters. You know what? I'm over that. You want to skate through it. The press box is half empty, and some of the people in the press box, I don't even want to get into it. But I would ask tougher questions. Now, I wouldn't have been in New York when they lost there, but it's enough already. It's enough of the excuses. But here's another beautiful thing. This is great. On the post-game show on the Phillies Network, Sportsnet, Comcast, whatever it is, I'm not going to say who he said it. One comment was, and this is beautiful, Phillies are maybe, not, he didn't even say maybe, Phillies are trying too hard. What do you mean you're trying too hard? What the hell is that supposed to mean? What kind of excuse is that? Trying too hard? You're supposed to play hard. You're supposed to play. You're professional baseball players. You need to play every pitch, every at bat, every time you're out on that field, you should play, or they're trying too hard. That's an excuse. And I love this comment. They have to score more runs. Really? You think they have to score more runs? Okay. All right. Well, that's a good one. That's a good one. And this is, I'm telling you, when you listen to the excuses that are made, the radio doesn't make excuses, but the TV a lot of times make excuses in the post game show. And again, I'm not going to dime out anybody. Just tell the truth. Right now, they're not a good team. Well, let's put it this way: they're okay. They're not. They're not a World Series team right now. I mean, they have some issues. All right, but before we go tonight or today or whenever you're watching this, a hilarious moment. By the way, we'll be on again on Saturday. Dave Spadaro is going to join us because that'll be after 2 rounds of the draft, and we'll talk about the draft. And Dave's there, and I really like Dave. Dave has really got some good insight, but he'll be on Saturday. But before we leave you tonight, a hilarious moment on TV, on TNT, with Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, Ernie Johnson, and I can't tell you how many times this has probably happened to people on the air. But watch this.
The other thing about Kawhi is, you all right, big fella? You all right?
No.
Catching a cramp?
Go ahead, keep talking, Chuck.
Yeah, we on TV.
I know what we're doing. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's that olive oil you've been drinking.
I know.
Hey, take some matches with you. Hey, listen, he couldn't hold it. He can't hold it. After 40, he can't hold it.
That's a first.
He can't hold it.
Unless
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
after 40.
That's
that
great.
wasn't something planned, was it?
No.
That's so funny. You know how many times that's happened to people, and they don't leave. But that show's so freeform. But hey, listen. You know what? I'll see you on Saturday. I gotta go. I gotta go. Oh, I gotta get out of here. Just continue without me.